Mommy, why does no one talk to him?
I'm sorry. I didn't know you were like this. She stated those things and then walked away. He sat there, utterly immobile. It wasn't that he couldn't move. He had been frozen in shame long before the wheelchair came around. The whispers around him started to spread over the room like smoke. He's the CEO of Wexler Tech, isn't he? Why would she go? No, why would she stay? The sound of glasses clinking was louder than the jazz music playing in the background. It was the kind of silence that hurts. Every look felt like a judgment, and every second felt like a lifetime. Logan Wexler, who was once termed the golden mind of Silicon Valley, sat alone in the middle of a fancy restaurant he had reserved for himself. The chair he was sitting on cost less than the suit he was wearing, yet it felt like it was heavier than the earth at that moment. And then she showed up. "Sir, are you okay?" Her voice had something that no one else in the room was brave enough to show: kindness. She worked as a waitress, young, black, and lovely, in a way that didn't need permission. Imani Brooks was her name, and next to her was a tiny girl who was no taller than the table. She was holding a coloring book with both hands. It wasn't right for Imani to talk to customers like that, not him at all. But there was something lonely in his gaze that made her move closer regardless. That night, in a world where money, looks, and privilege are everything, compassion came in, wearing an apron. This isn't just a narrative about love. This is a black story about respect and finding strength where others see weakness. We at Hidden Worth tell stories that show that kindness knows no color, no status, and no end. So, before we go any farther into this night that changed 2 lives forever, take a moment. If stories like this make you feel something, and you think there are still calm places where people are good, hit the like button and stay with us. Because sometimes the best stories don't start with money or fame. A stranger asks them a basic question to start. "Are you okay, sir?" Logan Wexler didn't wander into rooms before the accident. He told them what to do. He was more than just a tech CEO. He was the head of technology. He started one of the fastest growing AI platforms in the world when he was only 34. His clients included both government contracts and Fortune 500 corporations. He established his company from a dorm room at Stanford, where he worked long hours, drank black coffee, and had a kind of brilliance that made venture capitalists nervous. Forbes wrote on him. Time had once put his visage on the cover. People all throughout the world looked up to him. People who put money into his company loved him, but he didn't have any close buddies on purpose. Logan wasn't very trusting. He realized early on that people cared more about achievement than they did about you. So he kept his circle limited, his image flawless, and his feelings hidden until the disaster. It was a private flight to Austin, Texas for a big conference. The storm wasn't expected. The lightning wasn't supposed to hit, but it did. The plane crashed. He lived, but his back didn't. Logan didn't feel anything when he woke up in the hospital. His body was quiet from the waist down. The doctors said it was partial paralysis. He said it was over. His life altered overnight. The board members stopped talking. His phone ceased making calls. And Brielle, the girlfriend who used to go to galas and beach retreats with him, progressively stopped coming around. At first, he believed she was just too busy. But after 3 weeks, she sent him a text with just one word: "I need someone who can keep up." She didn't mean emotionally. She meant in a bodily way. Logan did not weep. He didn't yell. He looked at the phone for hours before turning it off. That was 6 months ago. Since then, he hasn't left his apartment much. He only talks to people when he has to. Twice a day, his nurse comes to see him. He sometimes wheels himself to the window and views the city he used to dominate when the night gets quiet. Tonight was his first try at going back into the world. A simple dinner date. A chance to be human again. But, as always, reality had other ideas. And that was when she showed up. Not the model who broke up with him, but the server saw him. Imani Brooks didn't grow up expecting life to give her anything. She learned early on that the world doesn't stop for a young black girl in Savannah, Georgia. Not one who asks questions, dreams big, and isn't afraid to grin. Her grandmother, a retired librarian who believed in discipline, morality, and the power of literature, raised her. Imani memorized Maya Angelou and underlined chapters from Toni Morrison while the other kids played outdoors. But books didn't pay the rent. Imani was a mother by the time she turned 20. Naomi arrived into her life on a dreary Tuesday morning, wrapped in a hospital blanket and bringing with her the type of tranquility that only babies can. What about the father? Gone a long time before the first ultrasound. No help with the kids, no messages. Nothing except quiet. But Imani didn't give in. She got 2 jobs, one in the morning at a laundromat and one at night at Willow Creek Bistro. No problems, no easy ways out. She came. Every one day. Even though she was wearing an apron, Imani held herself with grace, head up, back straight, and voice serene. She wasn't giving out food, she was keeping space. For her own sake. For Naomi. For any woman who has ever been told she wasn't good enough. But not everyone agreed with that. Some consumers noticed her skin first. They snapped their fingers instead of saying please. The way they said, sweetheart, made her feel bad. One man said, "It's good that they're hiring more people like you these days." She smiled, not because she agreed, but because she knew that some fights weren't worth the trouble. It wasn't her silence that made her strong. It was in what she decided not to let shatter her. Imani worked a double shift and baked all night using flour she borrowed from a neighbor when Naomi's school held a bake sale, and she couldn't afford the goods. Naomi felt sick the same week her power bill was due, so she sold her necklace to pay for both. People thought of her as just a waitress. But to Naomi, she was a superhero who wore Converse shoes instead of a cape. Naomi would kiss her on the cheek and say every day before school, "Be brave today, Mama." And Imani would whisper back every day, "I always am." Imani wasn't meant to be working that night at Willow Creek. She had switched shifts with another girl so she could get some more money for Naomi's birthday next week. She had no idea that going inside the dining room would transform her life. She didn't think she'd run upon a billionaire in a wheelchair. She also didn't expect to be the first person to properly see him that night. But what about Grace? Grace doesn't care about timing. It just appears when it's needed. That's exactly what Imani did. That night, Imani took 100 drink orders. And, as always, she strolled between tables like someone who was used to being unnoticed. Not invisible, but not really observed either. People typically don't see the person holding the tray. Not the person, but the uniform. She saw Logan sitting alone at the corner table by the window on her way to table 6. His water glass was still sweating next to his untouched entree. He hadn't moved in a long time. At first, Imani believed he was simply another angry customer who wanted to complain. But then she took a good look at him. His outfit was fitted and sharp, like someone who was used to dressing for meetings with individuals who owned buildings. But the way he stood didn't match the strength of the fabric. He seemed like he was in the air, like a man who was holding his breath while swimming. Imani froze when his eyes met hers for just a second. Not because they were afraid. From becoming recognized. Not the sort that says, "I know you." But the kind that talks softly, "I see you." His look wasn't sharp. It wasn't judging. It was vacant in a manner that made you want to grab on to something real. She was the first to look away. But the moment didn't finish. It followed her back to the kitchen, stayed with her while she took another order, and pulled at her every time she walked by his table again. Naomi came next. Imani didn't even see her daughter sneak out from behind the kitchen door, holding her little notepad like it was a prize. Naomi pulled on her apron. "Mommy," she whimpered, "why is that man so sad?" Imani blinked. The question seemed to have more weight than it should. "I think he's waiting for someone," she added quietly. Naomi turned her head and looked again. "Maybe we shouldn't make him wait by himself." That was the sentence. That one simple, innocent sentence. And a 7-year-old girl had just changed the course of the night without even knowing it. Imani and Naomi came over to Logan's table. No tray, no pad for orders. "I just have a question. Are you okay, sir?" This time, his gaze met hers more slowly. Not shocked. But it got softer. He gave a tiny nod. Naomi showed her drawing. "It's a bunny. I made it. He is also alone. But he has food." A break. Then, Logan's mouth almost smiled. And just like that, the air changed. Not too loudly, not in a big way, but not loudly, like the sound of something that has been locked for too long and is now gently clicking open. Imani was aware of the rules. Be nice, be quick, and keep going. That was the unstated rule for working in a fancy restaurant like Willow Creek. People came for the meal, not to talk, not from her at all. People thought that a black waitress with a southern accent, no college degree, and a child with her should smile and stay in the background. She was already breaking more than just the rules when she walked up to Logan Wexler's table without a menu, a tray, or a job to do. She was going against the rules. But this time, she didn't care. The look in his eyes earlier, sharp but lost, proud but tired, had lingered with her like a splinter in her flesh. When Naomi gave him her bunny drawing, he didn't flinch. He hadn't told her to go away. He didn't feel sorry for her daughter. Most guys like him wouldn't even have looked him in the eye. Imani took a deep breath and sat down next to his table. She didn't sit directly across from him. Instead, she sat at an angle, not too close or too far away. She whispered softly, "I can go if this makes you uncomfortable, but you look like you've had a long night." Logan blinked, not sure if this was a trick. He looked around the room, half expecting a manager to come over and yell at him or a camera to jump out from behind a plant. No one did anything. No one saw it. "I don't want anything," Imani swiftly added. "No selfie, no story to tell my friends. I just don't like seeing folks eat alone when they appear like they didn't want to." That hit him. Because she was right. He didn't want this. He nodded slowly, and she stayed. She requested simple things. Nothing that hurts. Just enough to feel like a person. "What type of music do you like best? Do you like movies or books better? Have you ever been to New Orleans?" At first, he just answered with one word. Then sentences that are complete. Then, a laugh. A real one. That was when Naomi came back, this time with a crane-shaped napkin. She murmured to her mom, "He needs a friend," loud enough for Logan to hear. Imani smiled. "She isn't wrong," she said. Logan looked at the bird on the paper, then at them. It had been months since someone had just sat with him without wanting anything from him. Without mercy. And even longer since someone decided to stay. Imani crossed a line in that silent zone between status and service, between being alone and being recognized. Not one that she had been told not to cross, but one she had to. You can really connect with someone when you stop following the rules and start following your heart. Logan hadn't talked about any of it in a long time. A lot of folks didn't inquire. And the few who did were merely fascinated in the same way that people are curious about car crashes. Brief looks, shallow queries, and nothing real. But Imani's calm made the silence feel comfortable in some way. So he said something. It all started with one sentence. Then one more. And before he knew it, he was telling a stranger more than he had told anyone in months. "I remember when everything got quiet," he remarked. "The plane had begun to shake. I thought it was simply rough air. I had taken 100 flights. But this one was different." He stopped. He looked down at his hands, which were resting in his lap. "They said I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky." Imani didn't say anything. She allowed each word's weight to sink in. Logan peered out the window. "They had to get me out of the wreck. The EMTs were the first people to notice that something was awry. I couldn't feel my legs." A calm breath. "They said it was an incomplete spinal injury. Said I might be able to walk again. But as the weeks went by, that maybe came to seem more like a no." He looked back at her. "That's when the real crash happened. Not the airplane. The people." Imani turned her head. He slowly nodded. "My so-called friends left. The company's board members had to convene in an emergency. They grinned at me in person and made plans for replacements behind closed doors." He turned away again. "Anne Brielle. She stayed at first, but not really. I could tell by the way she looked at me that she used to know me and love me. She let go of my hand. Then they stopped coming. She sent a message one day. It was only one line." He stopped for a moment and tightened his jaw. She said, "I need someone who can keep up." Imani's eyes become softer. She didn't gasp, did not flinch. I just listened. I didn't get angry, he said. Not really. You can't make people remain, but when they depart, there's still a hole. Again, silence. But it wasn't too heavy. It was clear, like the air after it rained. Imani leaned back a little. She added softly, I don't know what it's like to lose a body that used to work, but I know what it's like to see people go away when you can't help them anymore. Logan gazed at her with a different look on his face. Acknowledgement. She went on. I've been a single mother since Naomi was born. There were times when people helped. Then one day, they simply didn't. She smiled, but she didn't change. But here we are. Still there. Or, still being there. Logan also smiled. It wasn't a mask for the first time. And in that instant, two very different lives found a strange, quiet bridge that wasn't founded on their shared past, but on their shared survival. The dining room had settled into a unique mood, calm and comfortable, like the calm that follows after a storm. Logan was still sitting down, but he didn't look like he wanted to leave anymore. He was leaning in with his elbows on the table, listening to Imani explain about how Naomi loved space books and wanted to be an astronaut. He grinned, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He forgot about the wheelchair because of Imani. Naomi helped him remember happiness. Then, as if the universe had called her to come in and break that fragile tranquility, Brielle came in. She didn't float. She came. High heels clicking on the tile. The expensive perfume she wore announced her arrival before she even got to the table. Everyone's head turned. Imani even stopped in the middle of a statement. Brielle was still the same. Long hair, perfect makeup, and a level of confidence that could cut glass. But her eyes weren't gentle. They were thinking, it's cold. Logan stayed still. She stepped right up to the table and stared at Imani, then Naomi, and lastly Logan. There was a grin on the edge of her mouth. Well, she remarked, crossing her arms, I see you've improved. Imani's body went stiff. Naomi moved closer to her mom. Logan didn't lose his cool, too calm. Brielle, he said simply. She tilted her head and said, I heard you were out, and I thought I'd check on you, but it's evident that you have company. She put a lot of stress on the word, as if it were something bad. Imani didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her quiet was like steel clothed in dignity. Logan looked at Brielle for a long time. Why are you really here? He asked. What? Brielle shrugged. I thought you might want someone you know to be there. You know. Someone who still fits in with you. He raised an eyebrow. Fits into my life? She leaned in a little and said in a low, piercing voice, Come on, Logan. This? A server and her child? Is this what you've turned into? Logan stared at her for a long time. No, he responded. I should have been seeing this person all along. Brielle blinked, surprised. He went on, You fled when things got hard. She came even though she didn't have to. There was no awkwardness after the pause. It was strong. Brielle remained there for a moment longer, then laughed and walked away, her heels clicking and her pride hurt. Imani watched her leave and then looked at Logan. You didn't need to say all that. I did, he said softly, because it had to be said. Naomi pulled on Imani's sleeve. Was that the mean lady? Imani laughed. I guess that's what you could say. Logan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. For the first time in months, the past had come knocking, and he had finally shut the door. For a little period, it seemed like the room was back to normal. Brielle was no longer there. The air felt lighter. Logan leaned back a little, and the corners of his mouth were still soft from the last time they talked. But peace doesn't stay long in areas like this. Imani got up to get Naomi some water. Naomi had quietly started coloring again. She felt it as she walked by a table nearby. A small change in energy. The type that doesn't yell at you, it sneaks up on you. Two older women at a booth whispered, but they weren't as quiet as they thought they were. One of them held on to her pearls, looked at Naomi, and said, Don't they have rules about kids running around in here? The other one got closer. I put the responsibility on the mother. Look at her, getting comfortable like she belongs. Imani didn't say anything. She had heard worse things. But Naomi did. The girl's hand stopped moving on her artwork. A man in a golf shirt across the room spoke up, and several tables could hear him. He responded, "This place used to have standards. Now it's only time for charity for whoever." The laugh that came next wasn't loud, but that was enough. It was enough to remind Imani of what people still thought of her kind. Logan heard it as well. He had been half listening and half watching Imani walk through the room with quiet grace. But now he was really awake. His jaw got tighter. His fingers curled a little around the armrest of his chair. Then he slowly turned his wheelchair toward the man in the golf shirt. Logan said in a loud and clear voice, "I'm sorry, are you talking about my guest?" The man blinked. Logan didn't wait. "Because if you are, I want to remind you that she was the only reason I stayed in this restaurant for more than 5 minutes tonight." The room got quiet. She didn't ignore me. She didn't act like she didn't notice me. She acted like I was a person, which no one else in this room, not even my date, could do. Whispers spread. Logan turned to Imani. "And about her daughter," he said. "She's better behaved than half the adults in here." Imani looked him in the eye. His eyes showed no pity, only respect. The man in the golf shirt sat back, his face turned scarlet, and suddenly became quite interested in his menu. The two women in the booth moved around uneasily, acting as if they were reading their wine list. No one else said anything. But this time the quiet wasn't frigid, it was awareness. Imani gently walked back to the table. Naomi reached up and grabbed her hand. Logan nodded at each of them. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he remarked to Naomi. The girl looked up and said in a low voice, "I know how to overlook those who are mean. My mother taught me." Imani smiled, but not for the throng. She smiled for herself. And this time, kindness didn't feel quiet. It sounded loud, unapologetic, not scared. As the night went on, and the restaurant got less busy, and the servers started to set up tables again, the loudness faded to a faint hum. Imani came back with Naomi's dessert, which was only 1 scoop of vanilla ice cream with rainbow sprinkles on top. Imani smiled and shook her head when Logan offered to pay for it. She answered, "You've already done more than enough." Logan lifted an eyebrow. "Not really. I've only been talking here." Imani looked down for a while, then carefully pulled out the chair across from him. This time, she wasn't sitting to the side like she always did. They were face to face. "You helped me a long time ago," she remarked. Logan blinked. "I don't get it." Imani paused and looked at his face, as if she were trying to confirm something. Then she went on. "I was in this summer program for minority kids in IT about 5 years ago. It wasn't a full scholarship, it was more like a way to get into college. I got in on a recommendation, and I was really nervous. I didn't think I fit in." Logan inclined his head, suddenly interested. Imani remarked, "One day we had a speaker who was a big name in the tech world. I wore sneakers and borrowed a laptop, while everyone else wore suits." She chuckled faintly, like she was ashamed. "You were that speaker." Logan blinked once more. "I've done a few of those, but Imani cut in and said, "You told a story. About how someone told you you'd never make it when you were just starting out because you didn't look the part." She looked him in the eye. "And you said, 'The only thing I care about is proving them wrong.'" Logan remembered. It came back slowly, his exact words. Imani added, "That sentence helped me get through the next 2 years. I kept coming back. I kept learning. I never forgot what it was like to be in that room and feel seen, even when I had to drop out to take care of Naomi." Logan sat back, shocked. He murmured, "You never said anything." "I didn't think you'd remember," she said. "But when I saw you tonight alone, embarrassed, and like you didn't belong, I knew that feeling all too well. And I wasn't going to let you sit in it." He glanced at her and couldn't say anything for a bit. And then he grinned, not in a pleasant or casual way. A true, quiet smile that means something. "Thanks," she said. "You gave me something once. Tonight, I just gave it back." Logan has been quiet for a time now. Not the kind of silence that makes you feel weird. This type wrapped over you like a warm blanket. It was unexpected, but you liked it. Imani was sitting across from him, sipping her tea. Her body was comfortable, but her eyes were still observing him in that calm, watchful way she had. Naomi was finishing her dessert and swinging her legs under the chair. She was humming something that didn't have a tune but still sounded delicious. Then, all of a sudden, Naomi looked up. "Mr. Logan?" she asked softly. He looked at her with his eyebrows raised a little. "Yes?" She turned her head. "Do you ever laugh?" Logan blinked. The question wasn't disrespectful. It wasn't meant to be funny. It was a real inquiry that only a child could ask without it appearing rude. Imani looked like she was humiliated. "Naomi, dear." But Logan stopped her by holding up a hand. "No, it's fine," he said. "That's a good question." He turned around to look at Naomi. "You know," he continued slowly, "I used to, all the time, but not so much lately." Naomi nodded as if she were thinking about a science fact. "Well," she responded, "maybe you forgot how to. Like when I forgot how to ride my bike and Mommy had to run after me for 2 days. Logan laughed, first softly, and then more loudly. It was rusty, like pressing down on an old piano key that hadn't been used in years. But it was real. Imani smiled and watched the event like it was something holy. Naomi also grinned. "Look, that's better. You appear better when you smile." Logan smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." Naomi picked up her napkin and gave it to him. This one was folded like a star. "It's a star that brings good luck," she remarked. "So the next time you forget how to laugh, just look at it." He took the napkin like it was made of gold. "Thank you," he murmured in a quiet voice. "I will." A simple paper star and a child's wisdom suddenly seemed like the most treasured things he had been given in years. He delicately folded it, put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, and grinned again. This time, it wasn't only because of what Naomi said. It was because something had changed. In him, all around him. And for the first time in a long time, Logan Wexler felt light. The check was previously paid. Logan didn't even remember giving his card to the waiter, but suddenly the bill had disappeared, like if time had folded in on itself. There were almost no people in the restaurant presently. People were putting chairs upside down on tables. The lights had dimmed to that gentle amber color that indicates, "We're closing soon," in a nice but definite way. Imani helped Naomi put on her small backpack by standing up. "Say thank you to Mr. Logan," she whispered softly. Naomi smiled big and turned to him. "Thanks for not being dull." Logan laughed again, this time without thinking about it. "I'll do my best to keep that streak going." Imani turned around and put her hand on Naomi's. "Okay," she said. "We should let you sleep, but I'm glad we talked." He could have let her go. That would have been simple. Safe. But Logan Wexler had been living behind walls for the past 6 months. And tonight, someone had come and knocked one of them down without trying or asking for anything in return. He took a breath and then spoke. "Imani?" She turned around. "Yeah?" He coughed. "I know this might sound a little strange, but I was wondering if you and Naomi would like to have lunch with me this weekend." She blinked. "Is it time for lunch?" He nodded. "There's a little jazz cafe not too far from here. They offer chairs outside, and Naomi might like the music that is played live. It's not fancy, just real." Imani looked at him, not sure if he was being serious. People didn't often ask her to lunch. They thanked her for her help, gave her a tip politely. They didn't ask. But Logan wasn't being nice. He was being honest. "I'd get it if it was too much," he said hastily. "But tonight meant something to me, and I'd like to give back the compassion, if that's okay with you." Imani gazed down at Naomi, who nodded, as if she had already made up her mind. "She likes jazz," Naomi said in a low voice. Imani smiled. Then back to Logan. "We'll think about it," she answered, her voice warm but careful. Logan grinned back at her. "That's fair." Naomi glanced around one final time and waved as they went away. "Don't forget to laugh," she yelled. Logan touched the pocket where the paper star was still there. He mumbled to himself, not planning to. People say that every story has a start, a middle, and an end. But sometimes the best stories don't end at all. They let you in. Logan Wexler went to that restaurant expecting to be turned down. And in a lot of ways, he was. By a woman who didn't know him. By a lot of people who didn't know how to help a man in a wheelchair. But he didn't anticipate Grace. Grace had on black sneakers and an apron. Grace had a daughter who was 7 years old. She saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be. Grace didn't come to help, she came to be there. Imani didn't come to help anyone. She wasn't seeking for a story to tell or a life to heal. She accomplished something that a lot of people forget how to do. She saw. Logan started to remember bits of himself that he believed were gone when he noticed this. The bits that have faith in people. The sections that still had faith. A lot of the time, we think that resilience means being strong, having muscles, having grit, or having power. But sometimes, resilience looks like a napkin that you folded up and put in your pocket. It sounds like a kid asking you whether you know how to laugh. It feels like someone who didn't have to care invited you into a moment you didn't expect. And maybe that's the most important thing about this whole story. You don't need a reason to be nice. It just needs space. So if you've ever felt left out, if you've ever been the one who was passed over, judged too soon, or left behind, think about Logan. And don't forget about Imani. Because someone is silently watching you live your life. And one day, they might sit next to you, not because they have to, but because they want to. That might change everything. If this story touched you in some way, if it made you stop and think or feel something real, you might want to give it to someone who needs a little hope tonight. And before you leave, I have one last thing to say. Have you ever had a stranger look at you in a way that stuck with you? Let us know in the comments. We read them all. This has been another Black story from Hidden Worth, where the little things are the most important. And sometimes being left behind is the first step to being found.